Hello, everybody. It's been a while, but we're back. And today I'm here with Tammy Helfrich, coach and host of the Right Where You Are podcast. Hi, Tammy.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for asking me. This is super fun to do it in
Yay.
person.
Yes, and you're my first guest in 3 weeks.
Awesome.
So,
Good.
Yeah. Everybody's
Well, welcome
healthy
back.
now, I think. Thank
Yeah.
you. It's been a while. So I guess to start, maybe just tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay. So, as Miranda said, I am a coach and I also host a podcast called Right Where You Are, which is basically just about learning to make a difference wherever you are, in whatever situation, whatever job, whatever life has for you. And so I help primarily women really uncover things that are holding them back. So things that are keeping them from living the life that they desire. And I love doing it. It's a passion of mine. I started a little over a year ago, although I say like I've been a coach my entire life. I just never called myself that. I'm just the one that people came to for advice and a safe place to talk and that kind of thing. So that's what I do. I also am on staff at a church, and so that takes up a lot of my time as well. But my passion is really coaching and really helping other women just, again, design and live the life that they want.
So you said you've been doing it for a year and a half?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So how did you get into it?
So so a little bit about my journey, and I don't know if you want me to talk about this now, but so I was actually in the corporate world for almost 20 years. I was in corporate sales and did a whole bunch of different types of sales, but worked for really big corporations. The last company I was with was a Fortune 500 company, and that was great. You know, I had gotten to a point in my career where had a really good job, I was making really good money, and I basically looked around and said, is this all there is? And so I really started kind of on this journey of personal growth. I'd always been into personal development and, really trying to figure out how to be the best you. But at that point, I just thought, okay, this is kind of starting this midlife thing, which I still don't really like to say that, but that is the reality of where I am. And, is this how I want to be spending my days? Like,
Right.
Again, I worked for a great company. I liked my job. I really did. But I just felt like there was something more to me. And so I had been, I started my blog about, 7 years ago or so. And that was kind of the beginning of the journey of really trying to start to express myself differently. And during that time, I started interviewing people that were really inspiring to me. And coaching just always kept coming up. And I had some friends who took some certification courses. And so I was always kind of looking for the right place to land. And then especially as I started thinking about leaving the corporate world, that was my initial thought was, well, I'll just do corporate coaching
Right.
because that's my background. But it just didn't feel right. And so I actually Brooke Castillo, who does the Life Coach School, has been a huge influence for me. I actually did coaching with her, and I have participated in a lot of coaching and really, chose not to go through the certification process just because I haven't found the exact one that worked for me. And also that coaching is such an unregulated industry that you can do a lot of different things. And for me, my experience and my life experience is really what people are coming to me for and not necessarily certification. So while I think certification is important, I think training and, there were a lot of things that I did to start that. I really just said, you know what, I need to do this. I felt like I had been suppressing my entrepreneurial spirit for a really long time. And so for me, it was just about the act of getting it, just starting out there and putting myself out there and learning as we go.
So was there one specific moment when you were like sitting at your desk and you were like, okay, this is it? Like I'm not doing it? Or was it more of a gradual?
It was a little bit gradual. When I was coaching with Brooke, one of my fears was that, I had left the corporate world also because it was very draining and, the kind of hustle and grind and like give your whole life to your job kind of mentality was what I was moving away from and didn't want anymore. And she really challenged me to say, well, you're creating what you want. You're creating your business. And what success looks like doesn't have to be anything like what other people have told you it's looked like. So that was the turning point for me of thinking, okay, yeah, like I can really do this and I can make it whatever I want and I can do it around my schedule and around the things, the way that I want to create my life.
And so when you made that leap, because I struggle with this sometimes now as an entrepreneur and making my own schedule, sometimes I feel guilty when I'm not like bent over my keyboard for 8 hours. But that's the whole reason why I did that, for all the things you were saying, so I could be in control and I could dictate. And I've listened to some of Brooke Castillo's stuff, and she works like now, like for 3 days a week or something
like that.
Yeah, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
But then there's this counterculture out there of corporate America that's like, if you're not working 60 hours a week, and, you know, like not taking care of yourself, then are you working?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. For me, it was really, that was, you know, a lot of the work that I've done myself personally, and then what I help my clients do too, is kind of, really untangling some of those beliefs of, you know, I mean, definitely in corporate America, there, you know, there's certain rules and there's certain things that you have to abide by. And, you know, but I started looking at myself and how do I really work well? Like, what are my rhythms and what are my patterns? Because the reality is, yes, you're supposed to be working between 8 to 5 in most corporate situations. Is everybody really working between 8 to 5 constantly?
They're not.
No, they're at the water cooler, they're checking email, they're on Facebook. So what really helped me was learning to look at, you know, when am I most productive and what are those times, and can I really get a ton of workout in there? And I think what most people find, especially most entrepreneurs, is there are certain periods of the day when you're more productive and you can bang out a full day's work in a couple hours, which is crazy. And so it's kind of just deconstructing that mentality of like, this is what work is supposed to look like. And I also think as entrepreneurs, it's really important to know what feeds you too. So like if the early morning is the really peak time for you and you get a lot of stuff done during that time, then maybe you take a break and you go and you work out, or you take a walk in nature, or you do something that refuels you. So it's really kind of paying attention to how your body works best. And it's always fascinating because there's so many people, you know, I've followed lots of authors and bloggers and, you know, entrepreneurs, and they all have their own system, right? Like you have to get up at 5 a.m. and you know, a lot of writers are like, you have to get up at 5 a.m. and you need to write for the first 3 hours of the day. Well, that works great for some people, but it doesn't work great for others. People who are night owls, they do most of their work late at night.
Exactly.
And so it's just learning like how you're wired and then what works best for you.
Yeah, I think I've come to appreciate that a lot, like recently, trying to be figuring out what works best, because I don't think everyone knows right away when you're in a routine where I was getting up and going to the gym and then going to the office. And now I don't have to structure my day like that. And it took me like 5 months to get out of the habit of getting up and going to the gym. Versus now I can get up and sit in my bed or sit in the living room and I do coffee and like read in my gratitude journal in the morning, and then I get right to work. And I'm able, like you were saying, to bang out for 3 hours, like a full day's work. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to make breakfast. I'm going to listen to a podcast. And then, but I still struggle with that guilt sometimes where I'm like, wow. Like the other day, I went to the movies in the afternoon with my mom and my brother because they were both off. And I'd literally done everything on my list that day. And I felt bad for going to the movies because it was 3:00. And but I didn't. So I think that's something I have to work on. Like, why did I feel guilty when all of my stuff was done for the day?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's, I mean, some of it's conditioning for sure, especially in the corporate world. There's, you know, there's just certain things you have to ask permission, or you have to do it this certain way. And so I think that is a journey of learning to understand that it's okay that you're doing whatever. That's why you started, right?
Yeah,
And always
exactly.
going back to your why. For me, it's always been about freedom, like the freedom to be able to do exactly that. Go see a movie when I want to in the afternoon, or go to something that my kids are doing, or take my kids to go do something
Right.
without having to be this really rigid, flexible, or, really rigid schedule.
So when you ventured out on this entrepreneurial journey, did you find like your family was supportive in the beginning, or how did that conversation go?
My husband for sure has always been super supportive. But yeah, a lot of family doesn't understand it. I mean, definitely I had some family who were just dumbfounded. What do you mean? Like, you have this safe, secure, amazing
Yeah.
job. Why would you give that up? Because to them, safety, and this is sometimes I think the older generation too, that was safety and
Right.
security to them. To me, it wasn't, because I was in the mortgage business for
Yep.
7 years before it melted down, and there was no security in that at all. I've been through, worked for really large corporations where you restructure and you come in and one day you have a job and the next day you don't. Like, there's this idea that security is the, big company and the 401k and the, vacation and all that kind of stuff. And for me, it just wasn't matching up with my values anymore. And, I'm so, so grateful for that. I left my company very well. I am so grateful for so much that I learned from that, but you couldn't pay me. I mean, seriously, they've come back to me and said, like, can we pay? And I'm like, no, there's no amount of money that can get me to go back to that kind of structure, having lived this now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think about that too. And the security, I get the benefits, but then at what cost to yourself?
Totally.
Like
Totally.
physically and emotionally. Like my mom and I were just talking about all of my aunts on my mom's side of the family have had that trigger finger surgery. And it's because they've all been on keyboards the majority of their lives.
Wow.
And then a lot of them have, like tendonitis in their elbows, like things that shouldn't, or hip problems because you've been sitting at a desk for 60 hours a week.
Right.
So I just think about like what quality of life, where's the trade-off there?
Totally.
I guess. And that's something people have to decide. If you have 4 kids and you need to feed them, okay,
Right.
that's different.
Yeah. Yeah, but I also think we, and again, a lot of it is societal conditioning and, just the path that we're told that we're supposed to go on. But when you really start looking at what works for you and your family, it can look really different than
Right.
that. And the same thing, like someone just said, and I haven't looked up the study, but like it used to be smoking was the big health issue, and now it's sitting,
Right.
because we sit all the time.
Yeah.
And there's, again, it works for a lot of people, and that's fantastic if it does. But there's also there's health benefits for sure. I have friends who were in high-powered sales positions similar to me, who literally ran themselves into the ground working for a company that the next day could fire them at any minute, And so it's just, for me, I've also had, unfortunately, a lot of death in my lifetime of people. And so, but I had a really good friend, years ago, who had breast cancer and ended up passing away at the age of 35. And she was the one who really made me see, like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Like, life is way too short to not be, happy in what you're doing, and to not have the freedom to spend time with your family and to do the things that you want. And so that kind of opened my eyes to, like, there's just this whole world out there. And especially now, I mean, think about how easy it is to start a business now. I mean, granted, it's not easy, it's not you just start and then you're making $1 million, right? It's simple.
It's not easy.
It's easy. There's not a lot of barriers to do it.
Right.
And so if you have that inkling at all that there's something that you don't want to do anymore, like, start exploring that and start looking at what's going to make you happier.
And how did that process go for you? Like you said, you were starting to work on yourself even at your corporate job. So did you start like I've always journaled. I mean, I found some diaries from when I was like 5.
Wow.
No, maybe I was like 8. Because my parents had just gotten divorced, and they were really funny. They were very articulate. And then as they got older, then my mom started dating this guy. I can't even say his name, but she knows. And he was pretty... I didn't like him, okay? I didn't speak to him for 2 years.
Okay.
And the journal entries in there were hilarious. and but also so telling, because so indicative of my personality now. Like so many aspects of like the way I was speaking.
Right.
Even to myself in my journal.
Yeah.
Are a lot of that's still the same.
Wow.
Some of it has improved. Like I'm much nicer to myself now.
Good.
Like as I got into my teenager years, you know, like, oh, I'm fat and all that stuff. But
yeah.
So journaling for me has always been like a source of release. And then like I've always been physically active. I've played soccer when I was little. I mean, gymnastics, volleyball, and now I train with Eddie. I think Mom was showing you some of the sandbags and stuff.
I've got the sandbag stuff in my garage. I just need to put it in the pillowcase.
So those have been the 2 consistent ways that I've worked on myself, I guess, and able to push myself. But what has that been like for you?
Journaling, I have always journaled too. I mean, not since that young age. Wow, that's impressive. But I actually have been going back through some of my journals too, because I have a whole book outlined, and
really?
had put it aside, and I'm pulling it back out again, and so I'm going through a lot of my journals to look at that. But so journaling's been good for me. There's really something powerful, and I tell a lot of my clients this, about putting your thoughts on paper and getting them out of your head, because when they're in your head, they just spin and they get worse there's also something physical about writing it out. So that's always been good for me. I read a ton. I've read a ton of self-help books, motivational books. I've always been really drawn to that from a pretty young age. And so I read a ton. I'm not reading as much. I'm being a little more intentional about voices that I'm listening to and who that is. But so that's been a big thing. I started going to conferences that with people who are wanting to change the world and change their lives. And so getting around those kind of people, it's not about getting around like-minded people, but it's about getting around people who think differently and who don't just want someone to tell them exactly what to do. Like they're which is the entrepreneurial spirit of that. And what else? Coaching's been huge for me. Coaching with Brooke was the beginning. And then now I have a coach that I work with who is just continually, first of all, showing me what is possible in this world, and then also just continually challenging me to be more authentic and be me. I'm a very relational person, so much about what I do is relational, and being real with people, which is what I think people crave so much. And then definitely being physical. I was an athlete growing up as well, and so I like to walk. Like I have a dog now, so I walk my dog in the mornings, and then yoga has been a really big thing for me. But really and networking with people. So that's a big thing for me too, and it's hard to find the right places. I've done tons of networking over the years, and there's, chambers and all different kinds of things you can do. There's leads groups. The one that we're a part of now, WESOS, which is Women Entrepreneurs Secret of Success, has been fantastic, because that's a lot of kind of what I was saying, those kind of like-minded, I don't like the word like-minded, because it's not about trying to be the same, but it's about people just who are more creative and can look at solutions and the world differently, and about building relationships with other women. So.
And it's almost people that are on a similar journey, right? Like you guys are kind of walking the path together. Yeah, I like WESOS a lot too. So far, that's been my favorite one, because some of those, I like you said to keep it real and like being honest. And I feel like a lot of the bigger business networking events can get very fake very fast. And that's really hard for me to deal with. I don't have a good poker face in those situations.
Right.
And so if it's 7:45 in the morning and you're like in my face about my target audience, I have a problem with that.
Right.
You know, like, can we just, for people.
Right. Yeah.
And then I found through networking, there are a lot of people that just network. Like the amount of time some people spend on networking alone, it's like their job.
Right.
And so there's definitely value in networking, but I think you have to try different things, like you were saying.
Yeah, and you have to find what works for you. Yeah. That's the biggest thing. Like, there are a million great things that you could do, but learning to trust yourself and your intuition, because that's always going to come from a much more flowing place than, you know, trying to force something to happen. And so that's been a lot of, again, being kind of intentional about who you surround yourself with, and then who you allow to speak into yourself. So like, I was talking to a friend the other day who's also a coach, and she was at a networking event and met this guy. You know, everyone said like, oh, you're supposed to meet this guy, he's fantastic, he'll do all this stuff. And it just was not, like, energetically, they just were not meshing at all. And it's because they were just on very different journeys. And so, yeah, you might get something out of that, or you might, you know, be able to send someone to him, or, but like, that's probably not going to be helpful for your business. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, when you find the people that you click with.
Yeah.
So when you are coaching, you obviously want to like have a relationship and build trust with those people, but is there any time you say no? Like, do you have to vet somebody and say like, okay, this is a good fit?
For sure. Yeah. That's, I do 15-minute free intro calls. And that's our time to look at that, because not everybody is ready to do the kind of coaching that I do, and that's totally okay. Or we just might not jive. Right. There are plenty of coaches out there that, and I have a network of coaches too, where people can go like, I don't think you're ready, or I don't think that you're, you know, that we really connect well. So yeah, definitely. And I think that that's hard for entrepreneurs to do, especially like, one thing that really helps, you know, that I've done a lot of work around is just around scarcity mindset versus abundance mindset. And so when you're in scarcity, of course, as an entrepreneur, when you're trying to get your business going, you'll take anyone. And I actually learned this lesson a lot in sales, because, being a young sales rep, you know, of course you wanted every customer. Right. And I had a couple situations with companies where like we had to actually fire one of my customers, which as a salesperson is horrible, because you know, that's your money. Income. But that also taught me like, you have to, you know, your services and your clients, you have to align a little bit. And so, especially in coaching, you know, if someone is coming in with this, like, so there's a couple, you know, there's all different kinds of coaches. And so a lot of coaches are more like what's the word? I'm just losing my total word, but like, you know, they want to keep you on track, and they're like, there's a word, I'm just completely blanking, but,
accountability.
Yeah. Coaches? Yeah. So like, they want to just like, okay, this is what you do. You have to do it by this time or whatever. I am totally not that kind of a coach, because I also, there's a lot of coaches who are like, I know exactly what you need and you have to do this. And for me, I tell everyone up front, like, I don't have your answers. I really don't. I'm here to hold space for you and to help shine light on areas that you're not seeing. Right. But you have your answers. Like, I want to be able to empower you to do what's best for you, because you're the one who knows that. I don't know what Miranda really wants and what your dreams and desires are, but you do. And so all I can do is help you do that. So, yeah, absolutely. There's just with anything, I think that's a really, really powerful thing, especially for new entrepreneurs. If you can learn to tap into, and sometimes you have to take risks. Sometimes you will start to work with someone, and then you'll realize pretty early on, like, oh, these aren't really a good fit. I have a client that I work with who's going through that right now, where she took clients because it was kind of where she was at. And then now she's realizing, man, they really just don't jive with what they want me to work in this particular thing, and I want to work with more creative people or doing things like that. So sometimes you have to adjust in that.
Yeah. I see some similarities in the way that we run our businesses, because in marketing, especially with new entrepreneurs, or in my experience, small business owners, it's scarcity mindset, and they want to just say yes, yes, yes. And then I have to really get them, like, force them to step back and reevaluate their mission statement. Like, why have you started this business? What value are you bringing to your customer?
Yeah.
And does this networking event 1 hour away serve any purpose in this mission? And
Right.
And there's, I don't know if you've read any of Tim Ferriss's books. Yeah. So he has that one saying, or like piece of advice, is, if it's not hell yes, then it's hell no. And I really like that philosophy, because instinctually whether or not you should go.
Yeah.
And if you're like, I don't know, it could be good.
Yeah.
Like, maybe, then it's no. No, then spend your time doing something that is a hell yes activity for you and your business.
Yeah. And it's really hard, especially for new entrepreneurs to do that, because especially if you come from a corporate environment, like just like I was saying, when I was rereading some of my journals, a big piece of moving away from that was getting away from needing permission for everything. Like, that's the corporate world. Like, you had to ask your boss for permission. You had to do, like, everything had all these checks and balances in it, which is good. But also, like, as an entrepreneur, you're not going to have that. Right. You have to go with your intuition and your gut. And that just takes practice. Yes. And so learning to do that, I think, is important.
It takes time, and I think it takes space to be able to listen to yourself. Because if you're constantly going, like, as an entrepreneur, you can easily fill your days with networking and driving and website edits and social media, but where do you have the space to just, like, not necessarily meditate, like, on a personal level, but just to think about your business and to create and be creative. Like, the other day I did, because I'm going through a rebranding of sorts, I guess, a forced rebranding, but it's turning out to be really good, because I've had time, by not networking so much, because my website and email are going to change, to just be creative. And I've realized that that's really important, and I'm most creative in the mornings. So the other day, I just taped white pieces of paper on the wall in the office and got a box of crayons, and, like, I knew I needed to brainstorm my website layout and a couple other things. And so, like, I just wrote those topics on those papers, and then just had some coffee and some music and just did it. Yeah. And now, like, today, that's what I was using when I was doing my website edits this morning. And so I think it's really important to, like, just quiet everything out, so that, because you can be busy all the time.
Totally.
But busy can also be distracting from, like, what's happening on the inside, too.
Yeah. Yeah. And my, Brooke Castillo would say this, just says it all the time, the difference between passive action and massive action. And a lot of times, all that stuff that we're busy with, networking, fixing this, doing that, like, it's all passive action, because it's not moving you forward in your business. Yes. And so being able to step back and go, okay, is this really helping? Because, again, most people would be like, oh no, you have to do this and this and this, and you have to burn yourself. Like, there's also this interesting phenomena happening now with a lot of entrepreneurs of, like, for the longest time, it was like the hustle, the grind, you got to work all these hours. And granted, yes, you do, but you don't necessarily have to either. Like, you can choose. I feel like, personally, if you're more centered and grounded and in the flow, so many things are going to flow out of that better than if you're constantly hustling and grinding and trying to push it. Like, it's just, again, a different mindset. It's the, like, you have to resist and fight against everything versus you allow yourself to be in the natural flow. And the natural flow is so hard for most people because we don't do those things you just said. We don't slow down. We don't get in touch with ourselves. We don't like really recenter on, like, why am I doing this? Did I become an entrepreneur to overschedule my entire life so that then I'm right back to where I was just on my thing? Yes. Or did I become an entrepreneur so that I have the freedom to go to a movie and not feel guilty about it in the afternoon? Yeah.
And that's a really hard, you have to train yourself out of that mindset.
Yeah.
And then there are still so I still have clients that operate that way.
Yeah.
And so if I'm on site with a client and they are asking, like, you make sure you submit this for approval and make sure you do this, then it's like each time I go back to that on-site location, it's like harder and harder to go back because I am doing the work outside of that and like changing my mindset, and then I'm like, oh, back in the the old mindset. And so that's a really challenging thing too, but I think it's good for me right now to contradict the two and remind myself, like, okay, this is why I can't be in this environment full time, like, because I've found that it wears me down and it stifles my creativity.
Yep.
And I literally work in a tiny office there, so it's like working in a box. But so then doing those activities, so journaling, and you said physically active. Is there anything else now that you have like gotten older, you have kids, do you not have time for those things, or do you?
I have to make time, like, for sure. Self-care is really important. I have a tween and a teen right now, so life is like changing, and but and it's simple things, like it's spending time in the morning meditating or journaling or just being quiet, or again just going on a walk, like nature has become something that is so incredibly important to me that I completely neglected for a good chunk of my corporate life. Because if you think about it, my kids were younger. I had a really demanding schedule, so you get up really early. I would typically go to the gym, go to the office, shower, do that, be in an office all day, or, I was in sales, so I would be out a lot of the time seeing clients and stuff, but in my car, then, work in an office, come home, the kids are, get the kids scheduled or whatever. Like, where's any nature in that day? None. I had none for years. And so that has become such a huge thing for me, even if it's just sitting outside in the morning when it's nice.
Right.
Hopefully finally it will be nice
gosh.
here in the Midwest.
We got one day yesterday.
But I, love to do that and just sit out there in the morning, or again, take the dog for a walk, or, just be outside with the kids when they're playing or whatever. So water is like important to me. I like to walk by lakes, or, nature has become a really big thing for me too.
Yeah, nature I think is really important. And I don't think I realized how important for me until I lived a mile from the beach. And I could just go to the beach.
Yes.
Like, I would come home and like throw my comfy clothes on, make a drink, and get on my bike and ride to the beach and be there in 7 minutes.
Heaven.
Yeah. And so now that I'm back in, a landlocked state, technically. That's been a hard transition to not have that outlet, because the beach, it's massive and it's huge, and you feel so tiny, and it feels like it's just a big release.
Yes.
And I would run on the boardwalk or just sit there. But so now trying to find different ways, like, just being outside for a little bit. Like, I bought a hammock last summer. It was like the best $70 I ever spent.
See, I love a hammock. I'll do that. And when it's nice too. The beach is a big thing. So that's also something that I have, we live in the Midwest, and my rhythm is, for the last few years, it is mandatory that we go somewhere in the winter by a beach for me. Because water is a huge thing. Beach is like, I feel very grounded and centered, and, it just energetically, it just does something for me. And so that has become a rhythm that we do. We have to go somewhere. And then I try to go somewhere by myself too, without my kids or my husband. So that, again, just recharging and living by water is on my list. We will. I've already told my husband, we will live by water at some point.
I will get back there too. Because once you've been so close, and then this vacation is great. I think I haven't had, my vacations has been to Virginia, but not to the beach. So, getting that time, like lengths of time on the beach, I think are super important. And it's so interesting because for some people, the mountains provide the grounding. Like, for me, mountains are grounding, and then the ocean is calming and kind of rejuvenating, because it's always changing. So it's interesting how those two facets of nature can affect you so differently. And so I think it's good to have a balance of both, but I still prefer the beach.
Yeah.
I like the warm weather better.
Yeah.
Just in general.
Well, we went to Cabo last fall, and that has it all. So
Yeah. Oh,
desert,
yeah.
mountain, and beach all right there. I was like, this is
Yeah.
amazing. We need to move here.
So do you go to the same vacation spot every time?
No, we don't. I mean, we like Florida, we seem to go to, because in the winter, sometimes it's like just go wherever it's warm. And we went to Cabo. We went to Sedona a year or so ago, which we fell in love with. Oh my gosh. Yeah, my family all is ready to move there. We love it there. So, we try to mix it up, and we actually just bought this big map that we can put push pins in. And so we've had so much fun already putting where we've been, and then now we have different colors for where we want to go. And there's just so much of the world. I love to travel. That's the one thing that I do miss that I did a lot in my corporate job was I traveled
for your job.
For my job. And it was kind of like, while it was grueling, it's travel for business is not glamorous. Like people think that it is, but I tried to make it, again, I had made it a rhythm. So it was kind of my time, and I would always try to do something. So there's so much of the world to see that we loved. And it's been fun getting my kids to want to explore. In the beginning, they were a little unsure, but now they're starting to see like, oh my gosh, there's a whole world out there of people that are different than us and places that look different than us, because we're kind of flat and nothing exciting here. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I drove through the South by myself, and that was pretty exciting. But and different,
Yeah.
So I think there's stuff to be seen in the U.S., but I travel internationally alone. I have for the past few years, or to go visit someone. So like the actual travel part is alone, and then I'm like visiting my friend Jenna, who's probably going to listen.
Hi, Jenna.
Hi, Jenna. You're in China. So one of my sisters was studying abroad in Vietnam last winter.
Oh yeah.
And so my youngest sister and I went, and she was 17. Yeah. 17 at the time. And so I'm not used to traveling with anyone. And then to travel with a teenager who has never traveled. She's been to Mexico, but that's it.
Yeah.
And so it was really fun to see how she just like opened up into this whole Vietnamese world, because I wasn't sure about her. She's a moody teenager. Yeah, and so I didn't know what was going to happen. And then, of course, our other sister was there too. So it was fun to see her in her element. She had been living there for a few months already, but my youngest sister, Melissa, I mean, she was making friends with these, like, other kids and showing them she uses Snapchat and the filter. I mean, and it was like, it's just so interesting. Yeah, it was really fun. We had a really good time, and I would travel with her again, because we got seated in separate areas of the plane, and so I was checking on her. That's a long flight. Yeah. And she was fine. Yeah. She just did her own thing. And so I think we realized we're very similar in the way, we knew that before. Like, she definitely is like my little spirit animal. The two middle ones, Eddie and Emily, are much more calm, and they just kind of go with the flow, even temper. And Melissa and I are kind of like the spectrums of the emotions. But then finding out that we traveled well together was really nice too.
That's so fun. It's so important to travel well with people, or to find people that you travel well with. So, because that's important, because it's, then you find out when you travel with people who don't travel real well, it's not so fun.
Oh my goodness. Did you and your husband, how long have you guys been married?
We had our 20th last October. Yeah. So we started dating when I was a senior in high school. So we dated for quite a while, and then we got married. So
that's a long time. So when did you guys do your first big like travel together? Like, because I think that's important for relationships to figure out.
Well, it's funny because my husband had never been on a plane until we started dating.
Oh my gosh.
I know, because his family just didn't travel. And we didn't travel a ton, but my dad loved to travel. And so we did a lot of road trips and stuff, but we had been on planes. And so he flew with my mom and I when we were still dating. And so that was interesting to see, that was just a different dynamic. Yeah. But, so our first like real big trip was really our honeymoon, which was interesting. Yeah. I'm trying to think. think we went anywhere else before that. I mean, like road trips and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
yeah. So, and we travel very differently. So it's actually, as we've gotten older and wiser, we get into our rhythm together. So, we were kind of out of the rhythm when our kids were younger of taking trips. And so we've gotten better at doing that. And we get into a rhythm. Like and this is kind of with our life too. Like he is a night owl and I'm a really early morning person. And so it was great when our kids were little because then we kind of split the duties, But so like when we vacation, one of my absolute favorite things to do is walk on the beach in the morning. I get up really early and I just walk for hours on the beach. It's my favorite thing. He's still sleeping, and so it's totally fine.
Yeah.
Because that's my time and I get to do that. And then he'll get up and then we'll decide what we want to do. And, like when we went to Cabo, we did some we rented ATVs, which was super fun in the desert. And we took a boat cruise and stuff. So we found our rhythm of like what we like to do together. So
that's important.
Yeah.
I think I was thinking my best friend and her husband, they got married last year. And I think that was their honeymoon was their first big plane, international trip together.
Yeah.
And so we were all like, how's it going to go? But they had been together for, 5 years at that point. So I think you probably have a good idea of the rhythm that you guys will be in when you travel.
Yeah. And it takes, and then definitely you add the kids into the mix and it's a little different. And so you deal with it.
So do you guys, have you maintained that rhythm throughout your relationship, or is that something you've had to constantly kind of refine your balance?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Different stages of life just require different things. And then again, like when we were, I was very ingrained in the corporate world and it was very specific, rigid schedules. And just as you grow too, and we've had big challenges in our marriage. We've only been married once, marriage. And yeah, that requires you to adjust with that. So it's, I think like with anything with life, if you just can learn to be open and talk about it and adjust as necessary. So my husband is about 5 years ago, he took up mountain biking and rediscovered his love for that. And so he races mountain bikes and it has brought him alive in a way that is just amazing. And so he loves to do that, but ends up spending a lot of time doing that. So we've had to adjust for that. And, some people, I talk to a lot of wives, maybe their husband's obsessed with golf or, whatever it is, who are really either jealous or not, not encouraging of that. Yeah. Whereas we just have come to a rhythm of, okay, we need to plan out our schedule. And then, I'm giving you space to do that and you give me my space to do my things. And then we make sure we have time together too. So it's a constant readjustment, I think.
It seems to me that is a common thread in relationships, making sure you have your own lives and interests and
totally.
And then, most of the time, or not maybe most of the time, but time together then too, making sure you get that. So I want to go back to life coaching for a second and talk about, so it's a marketing podcast, so we'll touch on this, but so what have you found? Well, two things. One, when did you realize through your coaching with Brooke that you were ready to start coaching people?
I think when she challenged me to just say you can create this and make it what you want. And you can keep coming up with excuses to not do it. So sometimes you just have to just take the step. So that was that. And I was just ready. It was just, again, like I said, I had kind of just said for so many years, well, I'm not an entrepreneur. Well, really, I have that spirit. I just wasn't, I was just in that corporate world. So,
right. Yeah. And you had your blog for a while. So how did that did that roll over into your coaching?
Yeah. So the blog was kind of the way that I started to express myself outside of the corporate world. So I, one of the, people that I followed had their big thing is, rediscovering what you love to do. And I had completely forgotten that I love to write. So, I used to write, actually I didn't journal as early as you did, but wrote a lot during, I used to write poems and all kinds of things.
cool.
And people over the years had always told me, like, your thoughts are very well put together even when I write an email or,
Really?
something. And so I rediscovered that. And that was a way to start putting myself out there in a way that was very different. It was a creative outlet for me.
Right.
So I'd had my blog for a while, and then I started my podcast, which has been 4 years.
Oh my
4 or 5
gosh.
years. I don't know. It's crazy now. Because then that was, another way for me, because I love to talk to people and
Yeah.
get very energized by spending time with people. And it also scared the living daylights out
Right.
of me, because like the technical aspect, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Like, I can talk to people, but how do you do all the rest of that stuff? So it was a big push out of my comfort zone, which has been a continual on my path of things that I've learned to do. Like, we can easily stay comfortable for most of our life, but learning to learn new things or to push yourself out, put yourself out there in a new way. So I started the podcast and started interviewing people. And then it's interesting, because when I started Right Where You Are, it was really about making a difference to other people. Like, how do you because I've always had a servant's heart. And so, like, wanting to serve other people and help other people. And that's really, really important. But as my journey has shifted into really making a difference to me and understanding myself better and living who I've been created to be, that then allows me to help other people do that. So coaching really, again, like I said, I feel like I've always been a coach.
Right.
But the reason I wanted to start my business was because I now have tools to help other people do that. So, like, I was just thinking the other day about someone who had asked me to coach them, but it was early on and I didn't really know what I was doing, and I hadn't made it a business. And, looking back on that, I wasn't really able to help her in the way that now I know I can help other people, because I didn't have tools. I didn't have guidelines. I didn't have, things for her to do. So it was probably all really messy, but that's just, and I also think you just have to make a decision and just do it, right? Just like you did. You had to say, you know what, I'm going to start my business.
And you have to always get the first out of the way.
Totally.
Like, before I started my podcast, I listened to so many first episodes of podcasts that I really like Joe Rogan. I mean, Joe Rogan has done over 1,000 podcasts.
Yeah.
And I went back to the first 2 are just him staring at a screen with his friend Brian, and they're like just trying to figure out all the technical aspects.
Right. Yeah.
And so I thought, oh, okay, that's fine. I can do that. If you compare yourself to right where you are, so at podcast 1, to where that person was at podcast 1, you can't compare. Like, I can't compare myself to Joe Rogan now. You have to go back and make it like even playing field. And I think that's important, in addition to just starting it, but to realize, like, you're always going to have that first. Like, you got to get it out of the way.
And we're so obsessed with this, like, making everything perfect, and not doing anything until it's perfect. Well, the reality is it's never going to be perfect, because you have to take some kind of step at one point. And one thing my coach says, which is super, super helpful, is, like, everything is just information. It's not failure. Like, I mean, you can call it failure if you want, but, like, if you try something, you put yourself out there, you put a program out there, and you only get a couple people to sign up. Like, you could say, oh, that's a failure. Or you could say, no, this is information. This is, now I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to ask myself the questions, like, what worked, what didn't work, what would I do differently next time? That's all this all is. And so we have this idea that, like, everybody's got it all put together and everybody knows. No, it's so not true. If anybody is honest about their journey, they're going to tell you, I had no idea what I was doing when I started, but I just had to start. And I felt like, and I think for most of us, there comes this point where we just, like, that internal intuition and that voice is like, okay, come on, like, let's do this, until the point where you just go, okay, I just have to do it. I just feel like this is the time.
And it's really scary, but it's also very exciting. Yeah. And there's nothing. Like, the quote on my quote board this week is, failure is your invention. And so that goes back to what you're saying. It's just information. You're learning if you're keep trying and trying these things, they're going to fail. You're going to have a lot of bad ideas, but eventually one will succeed and you'll have some good ones. And so if you're not failing, then you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah. And you can always adjust. Like, I've heard so many people say, like, well, I tried this. It didn't really get the response I wanted. So I tweaked it and then I launched it again. And I that's the great thing about being an entrepreneur. You don't have to go through 50 levels to get something approved, that then it's too hard to go back and change it. As an entrepreneur, you have the fluidity to change things as you need to and to try it out.
Exactly. And I'm in a marketing course right now with Seth Godin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Like, when I got the cease and desist for the business, then I kind of put things on hold. So I had some free time, and he happened to be like advertising his intro for the course. And I was like, I'm just going to do it.
It's awesome.
I'm just going to, because I budgeted to invest in myself, like to attend a conference and to take a course. And
Perfect.
So, yeah, it worked out. But one of the prompts recently was strategy versus tactics. And so your strategy should be the consistent thing in your business, in your life, your mission statement, your philosophy, like the why you are here.
Right.
And then the tactics are the things you use to execute that, right? So you're constantly testing tactics.
Right.
And the point of the exercise, he said, was to make people comfortable with tactics as disposable items. And so you're going to do a podcast, and if podcasting doesn't work for you, or your audience isn't responding, maybe that's not the best avenue for you, or you don't like talking to people.
Right.
I have a hard time with the podcast being by myself. So I haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
But as long as I'm with someone, I'm comfortable.
Yeah.
And then, or you start a blog, or like I haven't done an e-newsletter yet because I go into my email box and mass delete everything I get like once a month.
Yeah.
And I don't open it.
Yeah.
And so to me, an e-newsletter, it seems like it's going to get lost in translation.
Yeah.
Until I establish that community. So
Right.
I thought that was a really important lesson to learn, because if you can think of them as disposable, then you should be committed in trying it and executing it well. But then if it doesn't work, you move on.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't let yourself, like, you might be disappointed.
Right.
And you might be upset, but that's okay.
Yes.
And then you sit in that, and then you go, okay, what am I going to try next? And what am I going to do? And just like you just said, I think it's so important, like finding the things that work for you. My coach that I'm coaching with right now, she built well over a 6-figure business without having a website and without having an email list. And
That's amazing.
Okay, so tell me that's not possible. Like,
Right.
we think that, we have to have this and we have to have this, or and just like you said with the podcast, the same thing. I started off interviewing people, and I interviewed people for a ton of time. Now I do really short one-on-one segments, and I haven't interviewed anybody in a really long time because that has changed with me. So it's like having this freedom and the confidence to just try something new. That's where creativity and innovation happens.
Right.
When you're willing to try something that someone else is not doing.
Exactly. Yeah. And even if they are doing it, you can do it differently or better. Or, I mean, you think about all of the thousands of podcasts that are out there.
Totally. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And books too, because a lot of people will be like, I want to write a book, but that's already been written, because if you get a title and you search and it, it will be there. It's not your book.
Right.
You haven't written your book.
Right.
And so there's always something that you can do. And it's one thing that I've always on this journey said is like, it's about me and kind of my journey. And if it helps someone else along the way, fantastic.
Right.
And now I look at that differently, because I know, like, yes, I have things to bring to other people. I have the confidence and the knowledge that I do help people. But in the beginning, maybe it's just about that. Like me, it was more about when I first started blogging, it was putting myself out there in a way that people hadn't seen me put myself out there. And it was scary. It was really scary. And will anybody read it? And what, and then same thing with the podcast, putting yourself out there in a new way. So, but it's really, really helpful.
It is helpful. And I was really scared to do the podcast too, because you get to this, you're the most vulnerable here, and I don't edit them. So I make a point not to. So then it's unedited. This is it. Like, this is real life. And so then there are a million thoughts that could go through your head about why you shouldn't do it. But I think so far it's the thing I like the best.
Yeah. That's
in my
awesome.
Marketing career, so we'll see.
Yeah. And I think with one thing my coach is really challenging us on too is just like finding those quirky and fun things about you. That's your marketing, right? I mean, that is when you can let people know who you are. That's how you're going to attract the people that want that.
Exactly.
Whereas most of us try to be like someone else, or we try to follow this 6-step program that has worked for somebody else, and then we get frustrated wondering why it hasn't worked for us, because it's not like having, if you're silly, it's not having the silliness, or if you love to have fun, it's not having the fun in it, or if you're just really good at whatever it is. I think that's really important too.
Yeah, so I think that's a good note to end on. I heard a podcast the other day, and he was saying one of his employees came to him and was asking for work advice. Like, she felt like she wasn't excelling at work, she didn't get that promotion, blah blah blah. And then he just said, like, I want you to stop thinking about work and start focusing on yourself. Like, look at your personal life and start focusing, what do you say, focusing on your heart, and doing things that make you happier, that challenge you, that improve you as a person. And when you start doing that,
Totally,
the rest will fall into place.
Yep.
And I think that's true.
Yeah, I do too. So good.
All right, so we can end it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.
Yay.